for the time period running from April 1st, 2025 through March 31st, 2028. The JP is signed by National Grid, trial staff of the New York State Department of Public Service, multiple interveners, Walmart, the Alliance for a Green Economy, or AGREE, the New York Solar Energies Industry Association, Independent Power Producers of New York, the United States Department of Defense, and all other federal executive agencies, the New York Geothermal Energy Organization, Turning Stone Enterprises, Fedrigoni Special Papers North America, Empire Natural Gas Corporation, New Yorkers for Clean Power, the New York Power Authority, and the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Local Union Number 97. Although the New York State Office of General Services and the Environmental Defense Fund did not sign the joint proposal, neither party opposes it. The Public Utility Law Project of New York, PULP, and the Utility Intervention Unit of the New York State Department of State, UIU, oppose various provisions of the joint proposal. NRG Energy opposes a single, discrete provision impacting a small subset of large commercial and industrial customers. Two individual ratepayers who became parties after the joint proposal was signed and filed maintain that it is not in the public interest, predominantly based on arguments that are beyond the scope of these proceedings. Stating what I just said differently, and this is a direct quote from the brief in support filed in this proceeding by multiple interveners. The joint proposal was executed and is supported by 15 parties representing the utility, DPS staff, customer parties, energy service companies, companies that develop and operate renewable and other generation facilities, governmental entities, environmental advocates, and unionized utility employees. The decision of a large number of parties with such diverse and often adverse interests to execute and support the proposal lends compelling support to the reasonableness of the signatories' intensive and extensive efforts to craft a balanced and equitable resolution of the literally hundreds of issues that were raised. We agree. As background, National Grid commenced these proceedings in May 2024, seeking to increase its electric delivery revenues by approximately $525 million and its gas delivery revenues by approximately $148 million. Testimony from DPS staff and interveners was submitted in September 2024, with staff recommending an electric increase of $142 million and a gas increase of $60.7 million, with the former being approximately $368 million less than what the company requested, and the latter about $96 million less. Shortly thereafter, National Grid filed a notice of impending settlement discussions, which culminated successfully with the filing of the JP on April 25th. An evidentiary hearing was held on June 3rd, at which more than 900 exhibits were entered into the record, and UIU and the individual interveners conducted cross-examination of a panel from the company and staff. As indicated earlier, the joint proposal establishes a 3-year rate plan running from April 1st, 2025 through March 31st, 2028, with new rates becoming effective on May 1st, 2025, subject to a make-whole provision that allows National Grid to recover rates for the period from May 1st until August 31st. On a levelized basis, the joint proposal provides for electric revenue requirement increases of $167.3 million in rate year 1, $297.4 million in rate year 2, and $243.4 million in rate year 3, Although the draft order explains that total monthly electric bill impacts vary slightly throughout the service territory due to supply price differences in various NYSO regions, impacts are approximately $14.29 in rate year 1, $6.44 in rate year 2, and $4.34 in rate year 3. The recommended levelized gas revenue increases are $57.4 million in rate year 1, $64.5 million in rate year 2, and $71.8 million in rate year 3. Average monthly total bill impacts for residential customers are approximately $7.66 in rate year 1, $8.08 in rate year 2, and $9.18 in rate year 3. While UIU claims that these revenue requirements are excessive, and Pulp argues that the bill impacts are unaffordable, the draft order concludes that they are reasonable and, in fact, in the public interest. The expenses and investments underlying the requirements are necessary to maintain safe, reliable service, to comply with state policies, and to continue to upgrade and modernize the electric system while preparing the gas system for current and future demands. Moreover, to mitigate the impact of the proposed increases, the JP recommends that they be levelized or shaped over the term of the rate plan, and that rate compression associated with the electric increases be spread across rate years 1 and 2. The revenue figures in the JP also reflect the removal of discretionary spending and non-essential programs from the company's original proposals, deferring some capital investments, and more than $110 million in annual efficiency savings. The revenue figures also represent significant reductions from the company's original request. The JP allows a 9.50% equity and a 48% common equity ratio in all 3 rate years, and includes an earnings sharing mechanism that is triggered if the company's actual return exceeds 10.00%. While both figures are the product of a settlement compromise, UIU urges that the 9.50% return on equity be rejected because it's excessive, and Pulp maintains that the earnings sharing mechanism is not in the public interest because it does not provide equitable sharing of earnings derived from actual returns exceeding 9.50%. The order rejects both arguments, noting that the opportunity to earn a fair return is a fundamental requirement of a rate order. An opportunity is not a guarantee, however, and the order also observes that the responsibility to manage operations efficiently, as well as the risks of failure to achieve profitability, rests on National Grid. The agreed-upon ROE is a reasonable result that reflects market conditions at the time the JP was signed, and the earnings sharing mechanism acts as a safeguard against potential over-earning, while also ensuring that ratepayers benefit from any efficiency gains realized by the company. UIU's challenges to the JP's revenue allocation methodology and its treatment of pension and OPEB expenses are similarly rejected. With respect to the former, the order recognizes that costs of certain electric and gas assets are properly apportioned to both demand and customer classifications. As to pension and OPEB expenses, the relevant JP provisions appropriately contemplate the inherent risks and potential impacts on the company's cash flows and credit metrics, and they are also consistent with the Commission's applicable policy statement, which requires that utilities reconcile any difference between their approved rate allowance for pension and OPEBs and the actual expenses, thus ensuring that customers pay no more than is necessary to fund the plans. UIU also opposes the proposed capital expenditure amounts in the joint proposal, and the order recognizes that they are a significant driver in the overall rate increases. The order nevertheless concludes that the capital investment levels are needed to replace aging infrastructure, modernize and strengthen the energy system to maintain reliability, improve resiliency, and meet the state's environmental and social justice policy requirements. It is also notable that the electric capital expenditures recommended in the JP are almost $1 billion lower than the amount requested by the company, and the gas figure is approximately $400 million lower. Turning to customer service provisions, in 2016, the Commission directed utilities to establish a statewide monthly bill discount program promoting energy affordability for low-income customers that would assist them in achieving a 6% energy burden, meaning that no more than 6% of their income would be dedicated to their utility bill. While National Grid provides a fixed monthly bill credit to about 163,000 customers in its Energy Affordability Program, or EAP, an estimated 286,000 additional customers may be eligible but are not enrolled. To address this under-enrollment, the JP requires the company to expand direct outreach in certain disadvantaged communities with an enrollment rate below 25%, or to customers whose service was terminated due to non-payment. The JP also adopts PULP's proposal to track self-certification and manual enrollment data on a monthly basis, and it establishes targets for each of the next 3 program years, aiming to increase the number of customers enrolled over the prior program year by 4.5%. The joint proposal adopts a GREE's recommendation that National Grid provide a 100% shareholder-funded weatherization health and safety program, up to $1 million in each rate year, that will allow the company to provide non-energy related services to address barriers to energy efficiency in disadvantaged communities and low to moderate income households. Services include remediation of carbon monoxide hazards, mold, pests, insufficient airing or ventilation, plumbing problems, blocked access to spaces in the home, and unsafe appliances. These services will better enable enrollees to take advantage of energy efficiency programs, contribute to a reduction in energy consumption and greenhouse gas emissions, and reduce overall energy costs for program participants. Consistent with a recommendation from PULP, the JP requires that National Grid increase the promotion and marketing of special protection programs like life support equipment, medical equipment, and elderly, blind, or disabled designations. Information about these programs will be made more available at in-person events and more visible on the company's website. And the company is committed to improving the training of call center representatives so they can more fully assist eligible customers in obtaining these services. Several provisions in the JP advance CLCPA goals. As the Commission is aware, non-pipes alternatives, or NPAs, are intended to reduce greenhouse gas emissions while avoiding unnecessary construction or upgrades to the natural gas system, while explicitly ensuring that any such measures should not jeopardize the safety and reliability of the system. The JP requires that National Grid consider NPAs in lieu of leak-prone pipe replacements, system reinforcements, main extensions, new service line installations and replacements, as well as forecasted load growth areas. To address concerns expressed by various parties that customer participation has been a significant obstacle to NPA adoption throughout the company's service territory, the JP includes a heat pump monthly credit intended to incentivize residential and small commercial customers to install a heat pump as part of an alternative to traditional pipeline infrastructure. The credit is available to qualifying customers for 5 years and will offset costs associated with converting from gas to electric heating. To alert customers to the availability of the credit, as well as to otherwise promote NPA opportunities, National Grid must provide relevant, timely information on its website and in promotional materials, and make direct contact with eligible customers through various means, including in-person engagement. In connection with a recommendation that National Grid adopt a heating electrification make-ready program, the JP allows NPAs to include costs associated with behind-the-meter upgrades, as well as health and safety measures that may be necessary to facilitate NPA participation. A related provision requires that the company consider and quantify the impacts of an NPA on bill affordability and identify the number of anticipated EAP participants so it can develop a strategy for mitigating energy burden increases associated with NPA-related electrification. National Grid will also implement an integrated energy planning pilot to support targeted customer electrification for NPAs, particularly with respect to 9 segments identified by the company as requiring minimal system upgrades to electrify. These segments are located within 3 towns in the Capital District, 2 of which include disadvantaged communities. Incentives for participation include a free home energy assessment, coverage of all costs stemming from the replacement of gas equipment with electric alternatives, the heat pump credit to offset increases in electricity bills, and coverage of 100% of weatherization costs necessary to ensure effective sizing and efficiency of electric heating equipment. Finally, the JP requires that National Grid file an annual report detailing its CLCPA activities, performance, and investments in disadvantaged communities, including information related to energy efficiency spending, demand response programs, and clean energy jobs. The company must also convene a stakeholder meeting after the report is filed, which will enable interested entities to provide relevant feedback. In conclusion, when reviewing a joint proposal in a rate case, the Commission must ensure that its terms enable the utility to provide safe, adequate, and reliable service at just and reasonable rates. The Commission must also ensure that the settlement's terms, as a whole, produce a result that is in the public interest. Factors considered in this analysis include whether the terms appropriately balance the interests of a utility's ratepayers, its investors, and the company's long-term viability, produce outcomes that may have arisen had the case been fully litigated, whether such terms are consistent with the social, economic, and environmental policies of the Commission and the state, and whether they are supported in the record. In light of all of the above, we believe that the joint proposal satisfies these criteria. That concludes our presentation, and we are available for any questions you may have.
Thank you. Thank you for the work that went into putting this together. I want to note that this is the first of two rate cases that we're going to be talking about today, and I think it'll be helpful for everybody here and listening to make sure we have a clear understanding of the process and various points that apply to both this and the subsequent rate case. And I also want to address a few misconceptions that have been coming up both in the news and letters that we've been receiving throughout the rate case process. So first, I think it's important that everybody understand that this commission, the Public Service Commission, operates under state statute, and we must comply with both state and federal constitutions. Our legal mandate is to ensure that utilities provide safe and reliable service at just and reasonable rates while never losing sight of our shared concerns for affordability. Now, electric and gas utilities, as natural monopolies, are fully rate regulated. That means they can't charge whatever they wish. Also, contrary to the desires expressed by many throughout both of these rate cases, utilities cannot be required to provide service for free. Utilities are entitled to recover their legally and prudently incurred costs, and their shareholders are entitled to a fair return comparable to industry standards. In New York, those returns are set at what many have considered to be the low end of the legal range, and they are among the lowest in the nation. By law, a review of a utility's proposed revenue requirement forecasted needs for 1 year. That is what we're required to do, and we do so through the public rate case review process, and that typically takes about 11 months. And in conducting this review, there are two paths we can follow. We can follow a litigation pathway, where we set rates as intended to meet the utility's needs for a single year. Alternatively, as in the case in this and the subsequent case we're going to discuss, we can go through a settlement process, which allows for a multi-year rate plan. Now, both paths aim to determine the costs necessary to ensure safe, reliable service at just and reasonable rates. And both pathways are similarly open and transparent. And by that, I mean any member of the public, any organization, any elected official may participate, and many do. And all the testimony and filings are posted publicly for public review, even by non-participants. And we collect that public comment throughout the process, in addition to holding numerous public hearings. Now, litigation may ultimately be necessary when parties cannot reach an agreement. There may be factual disputes requiring sworn testimony, or ultimately parties may believe that a settlement would not produce a better outcome. However, we typically pursue a settlement because of several important reasons. One, the administrative burden is a lot lower for everyone involved. Two, it enables multi-year rate plans, meaning we do this once, we set a firm objective for several years, and we don't repeat this process year after year after year. And three, it balances diverse interests of customer advocates, labor unions, businesses, environmental groups, and others, as noted by Judge Belcito in highlighting the various parties signing on to this agreement. And it also allows for policy issues beyond what's in the litigated record. Important policies, such as expanding our low-income outreach. Now, if the settlement collapses late in the process, and ultimately we cannot come to an agreement to extend the timeline, we have a variety of legal options, including the use of temporary rates. But even then, we're still bound by law. We cannot set rates that deny recovery of prudent costs. To put it another way, even if we were to set temporary rates that are lower in the near term, the difference will need to be made up in the future. And as anyone with a credit card knows, when past balances and future needs combine, that typically means higher costs. And for ratepayers, such an approach would lead to future rate increases that are even higher, creating an even greater affordability burden. Now, with that overview, I want to talk about the specifics of the case. And again, I want to commend staff for their work in bringing this before us today. Both staff, the parties involved, the elected officials as well. In looking back on the original proposal from the utility, I feel confident in saying that it has been scoured by all parties and the various expert witnesses for opportunities to identify what we consider to be discretionary and non-essential spending. I think we've gone to great lengths eliminating or deferring these expenses entirely. And I was very impressed and pleased to see so many parties to the joint proposal, 15 in total, 15 spanning a wide range of perspectives and a wide range of outcomes and desires. And I want to acknowledge that we also received over 4,500 public comments, all of which have been reviewed and are part of this case and available for public review. Now, as I know in the past, and I know my other commissioners have said, rate cases are where our work to balance multiple objectives come into clear focus. And it is through our public and transparent process that our own objectives are often voiced by the parties who bring their perspectives to the table. We know that we have achieved a good outcome when we ensure that all participating parties are heard and we can reach a compromise with the aim of ensuring our energy system can continue to serve its intended purpose and the Commission can meet its legal mandates. And as with all compromises, it is rare that everyone involved gets everything they are looking for. I, and again, I'm sure my fellow commissioners agree, remain very concerned about affordability. The joint proposal before us does do a good job of getting costs down, but the increases are still higher than we'd like to see, despite the understanding that they reflect evidence presented in these cases. Now, while we're committed to finding the least impactful outcomes to make the case as efficient as possible, just and reasonable rates and the ability to maintain reliability require us to provide a utility with sufficient revenues to cover its cost of service. Of particular note and interest are the provisions aimed at minimizing future costs and aligning future investments with the overall direction of the state's climate and energy policy. Notably, for certain new customers requesting gas service, National Grid will be required to determine if customer needs can be satisfied through a variety of alternatives, potentially at a lower cost, which means rather than simply providing new gas service as a default approach, we can align our investments towards a future where we decrease our reliance on overall gas use. Grid is also going to be required to proactively develop load reduction strategies to mitigate or avoid the need for future investments, an approach that will not only pay dividends for years to come, as customers will not have to pay for these investments through higher and higher rates. Further, the proposal incorporates additional resources to support energy affordability programs and resources to enhance existing protections for vulnerable customers, protections that I think we all agree are becoming more essential than ever. Now, for all these reasons, I am supporting the joint proposal, and I want to send a message to the parties and the members of the public that over 90% of the public comments received expressed concerns about high costs for utility service in one way or another. Over the past several years, household expenses have gone up faster than paychecks, and utilities are an essential service that many cannot afford. And when unavoidable utility costs go up, families face difficult decisions about what they won't spend money on. Could be groceries, could be medicine, could be anything, but something has to give. The Commission shares these concerns, and we have heard in this case, and frankly every case I've participated in as a commissioner, these same concerns. There are structural and legal factors utilities are addressing that in isolation are serving a legitimate public interest, but cumulatively they are driving rates up. These factors limit how much we can cut down the rates, and we need policymakers at every level of government to effectively help us address all these issues. But more importantly than anything else, we need the utility companies across the state to step up. They too need to do more to meet this moment. Affordability is a paramount concern right now. And this department has taken multiple actions to find efficiencies, to control expenses, and develop options to assist the most vulnerable customers and minimize costs for all. And we fully expect utilities to be similarly innovative with these goals in mind. That said, I again support the JP and thank you for your efforts. Commissioner Lisi.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank the department and all of the highly professional people involved in many months of putting this agreement together. I'm going to support it. I can't really add anything to what the chairman just said. I think that was a perfect delivery of covering all of the concerns of everybody involved. And I think that this, by agreeing to this, that we do extend protection for a number of years to everybody involved. Primarily, people think that it is the ratepayers that are affected the most, and emotionally, I agree with that, but it also does protect the shareholders and the companies as well. I'll be supporting it. Thank you, Chairman, for your remarks. I think you pretty much covered it all.
Thank you. Commissioner Valesky.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just have a few overarching comments, but before I do that, I just want to take a half a minute to acknowledge the fact that we're back in our traditional home here on the 19th floor of Agency Building 3, and I do want to acknowledge the good work of our colleagues at our sister state agency, the Office of General Services, to return this building to its full functionality and full use. It's good to be home. Judge Clark, Judge Belcito, thank you for presiding over this extremely important process, to the trial staff who participated, and to the programmatic staff at the department who participated and put a lot of long hours and really good work in this development of the joint proposal. Thank you for that work. I agree with Commissioner Alisi. I appreciate, Chair, you taking the time to lay out, as you did extremely well, the responsibilities that the Commission has, first and foremost, and then how that relates to this particular rate case. Just going to touch on two, and there are a number of specifics in the joint proposal that we could talk about, and I know some of my colleagues, I'm sure, will do that. But I just want to mention two overarching points, if I could. Chair, I think you had used the word scoured when you referred to the staff's efforts in receiving the proposal, the original proposal from the company, and the point in time from then to the development of a joint proposal. I think that's a good word, and I think it's a good way to describe it, because the focus on affordability, which is, I know firsthand, top of mind for staff at the Department of Public Service, going through that proposal with a fine-tooth comb and really removing as much of the non-essential discretionary funding that existed, and making sure that the product that eventually comes to us is the minimum amount that is needed to provide safe, reliable service. So I do want to highlight that in addition to the chair calling that attention. Thank you for that effort. The other thing that did strike me, and Judge, you began your presentation with it, the number 15, I believe, 15 signatories to this joint proposal is an unusually high number of signatories. I think the most of any JP that has come before me in my time here on the commission. But I was also struck not only by the number of signatories, but the signatories that are often at adverse positions with each other. And we can just kind of go through, you know, the New Yorkers for Clean Power, for example. We're not always seeing them on joint proposals. Independent Power Producers of New York. Agree, the Alliance for a Green Economy, signed on to this joint proposal. And even those who did not, Pulp and others, so some tremendous participation from them. And I think that's really, really important, because that tells me, in addition to all the individuals who submitted testimony, it tells me that there is a sense that when there are difficult issues that will eventually come before the commission, that there are those who want to participate, as opposed to simply just sitting back and watching what happens. So kudos to everyone who participated in this process. And I'll just highlight the final signatory that you mentioned, Judge Clark, because I think it's important. We talk about rate cases, or rate cases come before us every so often and every few months. But the final signatory I want to highlight is the IBEW Local 97. And the reason why I want to highlight them, yes, they signed on, but that gets to a more important issue. The working men and women who, in this case, for Niagara Mohawk, but for other utilities as well, who are out there day and night, in and out, 24/7, responding to calls, doing the work that needs to be done on a daily basis and on the ground to make sure that there is safe and reliable electric and gas service. I think their work needs to be highlighted, and I'm doing that this morning because, you know, sometimes when there's general frustration over rates and high cost of living, that there are men and women who are just doing their job. And I think it's important to remember that and to remember their purpose and what they are doing each and every day, in this case in the National Grid service territory, but certainly across the state as well. So I want to thank them for their work and encourage them to continue to do their very best. And in the final analysis, Judge, I do also agree with you in your conclusion as the presiding ALJ that this joint proposal is in fact in the public interest, and I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Majori?
Thank you. I'd also like to thank the staff and the participating parties who put so much work into arriving at this joint proposal. I'm going to say a few things and ask some questions that I think build upon what my colleagues were driving at. We're sitting here at the end of a process that has been underway, as we've heard, for many months and has evolved, as we've heard many parties. What I have the ability to do right now is vote yes or no. We on the commission evaluate documents, including public statements that are offered along the way. We review the record, and if there is a joint proposal, or we've heard the abbreviation JP, as there is in this case, we can vote to approve or reject an order that would implement the JP. I know technically I could spend time walking through a number of caveats, but as a practical matter, the commission can approve or reject this order. Our choice today is distinct from how it is often framed in the media, that we are voting on whether or not to raise rates, as if a yes vote raises rates and a no vote does not raise rates or reduces rates. A no vote today would not prevent a rate increase, and in all likelihood would set in motion a chain of events that will lead to a higher rate increase than would take effect if we approve the order in front of us. To be clear, upon reviewing this order and the joint proposal it would implement, I conclude that a no vote would be worse for ratepayers than a yes vote, even for the types of reasons such as affordability expressed by commentators as reasons for concern. I'm now going to ask some questions, and the reason I'm going to ask these questions is to try to see if this conclusion is well-founded. I will not ask every question for which I tried to determine an answer while reviewing this order, before this moment, because that would take too long. But rather, I'll focus on a representative set of issues to illustrate how I reached a conclusion. My first question is this: what if we just decided as a commission just to refuse to ever approve a rate increase under any circumstance? For all time, we're just not going to approve a rate increase. What happens?
Well, by law, the commission has to make a decision. So one of the results could be that the rates that were filed by the company could go into effect just by operation of law. Otherwise, the commission would ultimately be required to make some sort of decision to change that result.
Okay, and the rates that were filed would raise rates by $1.4 billion more than this JP?
It's approximately what was filed in this case, yes.
Okay. So as a practical matter, I can vote yes or no, and if a no vote carries the day, like I said, what's likely to happen is a process that either brings us back to where we are today or worse. Now, I think much of this has to do with how the rate plan, as the chair was explaining, would allow for the recovery of costs that are either explicitly legally mandated or reflect the company's strategy for complying with laws. In other words, from my perspective, there is very little discretionary spending that we would be approving, and we've heard this already today. There was quite a lot of discretionary spending removed from what the company included in its initial petition through the process, as explained in your presentation. Judge Clark has explained in your presentation, and as the chair explained. So I just want to be crystal clear. As a general statement, do you agree with that?
Yes, I absolutely agree with that.
Okay. So just, for instance, in terms of a legal requirement, local governments can charge this utility taxes that have little or nothing to do with paying for the delivery of energy to ratepayers. Can we legally reject cost recovery for the company to pay its taxes that are assessed, imposed, and collected by local governments like cities and towns?
No, the law requires that any taxes that are imposed on the utility be recoverable from ratepayers.
Okay. There's a number of costs associated with the provision of safe and reliable services, which is also a legal requirement. An example of this is the repair of leak-prone pipes. Now, I understand how much and when and where are all debatable issues, but say we just wanted to accelerate the transition away from the reliance on natural gas and decided to reject any cost recovery for fixing leak-prone pipes. Putting aside the wisdom of such an approach, is the utility ultimately legally required to fix leak-prone pipes?
The utility is required to maintain safe service to the community, so yes.
So yes, okay. So, we hear a lot about the ROE. What if we wanted to set the ROE to 0?
Well, there's a century plus of legal precedent that requires investor-owned utilities to be given an opportunity, the investors in those utilities, to be given an opportunity to earn a fair return. So they would likely be rejected by the courts, and we'd have to go through this exercise all over again.
Okay, so that's if we set it to 0, but what if we just lowered it a little bit? Let's say, I'm not asking about the process, but say we wanted to lower the ROE to 9%, flat 9%. What would likely happen?
Well, I think what's important to recognize is that we have staff experts in finance and accounting that provide testimony in this case. Even some of the other parties have experts that provide finance testimony. Their opinion is what's reflected in their testimony and in the joint proposal. That's what's required to keep the investment income flowing. What that would do is upset the balance between what is supported by investment income and what would be debt income. drive away investors, and that is not an outcome that our Director of Accounting and Finance, Jeff Hogan, could fill in more details if he'd wish, but that just wouldn't be in the interest of ratepayers overall. It would ultimately drive up costs, in our opinion.
That's what I thought, based on some previous conversations, that we might save a few pennies in the very short term, but in the long term, it would end up costing ratepayers more. Is that likely?
Yes, Commissioner, I would agree with that. The savings that could occur from going with a lower ROE would be largely offset by higher debt costs that would likely materialize. That the higher debt costs would come about because there would likely be a downgrade, credit rating downgrade for the companies. Some of the companies, for instance, Niagara Mohawk right now is rated BBB+. Its metrics, its financial metrics, barely support that current rating. As has been stressed several times, we do all we can to keep the rates affordable, to keep expenses as low as possible. One of the ways we do that is by allowing only enough net income or return to shareholders, enough to keep the metrics, just enough to keep a credit rating. If you were to go lower than that, for instance, 9% instead of the 9.5% in this rate plan, that would drive the metrics lower. It would signal to the rating agencies that there's the regulatory regime, which is part of what they use in deciding what the credit rating should be, is not what it was, and is a tougher situation for the companies, and in my opinion would almost no doubt result in a downgrade. That would lead to higher debt costs that would be locked in for anywhere 10 to 30 years because the debt they take out is has those levels of maturity.
Okay, thank you. So let me ask about a couple things that I don't think are at least directly legally mandated. Surely the company's economic development programs and the EAP are not dictated directly by law. Why don't we eliminate them?
Well, there are programs that are meant to improve the utilities provision of service overall. A lot of those programs fit into that or help the communities in terms of providing jobs and even if it's not directly like the economic development programs, supply energy to businesses that ultimately do provide the jobs in the local communities.
So I just want to probe on this a little bit more. On the economic development programs, I don't particularly like them, but it seems that by expanding the base, by attracting or growing businesses, that actually helps the larger pool of ratepayers. Is that correct?
It absolutely does. I mean, the more customers that attach to the system, especially within existing infrastructure, the more that the rates can be put out over a larger group of customers.
Okay, and on the point about the EAP, if we didn't have an EAP program and there was more unrecoverable debt, how does that reflect on the vast majority of other ratepayers?
So the difficulty is if you have people that can't pay their bills and go into arrears, then the company starts to build up uncollectible expenses, but they're entitled to cover their costs. And so those uncollected bills have to be collected from other ratepayers that are able to afford it.
Okay. There was a debate between some of the commenters about how the company calculates depreciation costs. The law does not dictate a particular methodology, so why don't we just go along with what has the least impact on ratepayers in this order?
Well, there's a lot of theories that go into developing depreciation rates, but essentially what you're trying to do is match the service lives that asset will be in service so that you're collecting up until that asset is taken out of service, and when new infrastructure is put in, you'll start over again. You don't want the overlap. I mean, that's essentially the theory that we're trying to uphold.
Okay. So, Judge Leakakes, I was asking these questions as a representative sample of the types of costs that the company has to recover. Am I missing some category that the company needs to recover, that they don't need to recover, really, that we could just reject?
No, and that's why we have our professional judges that sit on these cases, is to review these joint proposals, to review the testimony that's filed in the case, and where parties come in and provide testimony that they believe that the company is spending unwisely or in areas that don't need to have spending in them. We look at that and we make sure that those costs are either taken out or that there's an explanation given by other experts from staff or otherwise that support those costs and say, no, they really are needed by the utility to continue to provide safe and adequate service.
Thank you. That's all my questions. I'm just going to make a concluding statement. You know, as I noted earlier, as has been noted, what's coming before the commission today is a joint proposal. That joint proposal document is essentially an agreement reached after considerable time and effort by some of the participants in the rate proceeding. Not all of the participants, but nonetheless, a number of participants. As Commissioner Valesky was highlighting, 15 parties signed on to the joint proposal before us, and those signatories brought forward a diverse set of perspectives. Some commentators have contended that the commission should vote no today. That argument asks that the commission discount and reject the agreement negotiated by a number of experienced and well-informed participants. It would also be a decision made with the full knowledge that the likely eventual outcome would be either very similar to what's before us today or higher rates. In my view, such a vote would be dishonest. There is a temptation to take the Pontius Pilate route and wash my hands and say, not my decision. But I think that would be unconscionable. So unless one of my colleagues changes my mind, I'm going to support this item. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Bright.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to ALJ Clark and Balsito for your work on this. So as with any settlement, this is an agreement negotiated among the signatory parties, and I was particularly impressed with what came out of these negotiations. So I wanted to name a few things that I found notable. Niagara Mohawk is enhancing the metrics, reporting, and outreach of their energy affordability programs, which Commissioner Majori just mentioned, so that more eligible customers who are not enrolled can get enrolled, and that we also track that progress. The 100% shareholder-funded weatherization and health and safety programs that will allow the company to provide services to its customers that will remediate barriers to energy efficiency that are also health and safety hazards, like Judge Clark mentioned. So mold, pests, ventilation issues, but particularly in disadvantaged communities and for low and moderate income households. The greater protections during extreme cold and extreme heat, so that people can manage their bills during these extreme times. And there were also the important provisions for distributed energy resources to create a flexibility market, and also the self-performance for distribution upgrades program, which could significantly bring down interconnection costs or just simply make those costs more predictable and easier to manage. So there are many things in this joint proposal, including the CLCPA provisions, which are outlined at the end of the draft order, that I was very appreciative of and have clearly been heavily scrutinized. And I see what is proposed here as advancing a system that is in the public interest. So I want to thank everyone involved, including the judges, staff, and all the parties involved in this complex case and who had a role to bringing us to where we are today. So I will be supporting this item. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Commissioner Sheehan?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks to Judge Clark, Judge Balsito, all of the staff who worked on this case, the parties to the case. Obviously, everyone who participated understands that this is a complex and time-consuming process. Your contributions as a participant are valued, and they do help to prepare and achieve a thoughtful settlement. Judge Clark did list the diverse signatories, and we've heard from my fellow commissioners on, that list that ranges from New Yorkers for Clean Power to the U.S. Department of Defense, which I think is impressive. And it does speak volumes to the number of diverse interests that were represented by this settlement. One thing that I wanted to just spend a little time on, as someone who lives in the National Grid territory, I've been getting a lot of phone calls and texts from friends. Wait, this is you? You guys are going to decide this? And, and I get a lot of questions, including from, my family members too. So, the bulk of the question is why, right? Why is this happening? And so just stripping it back and looking at the drivers, I think, Judge Clark, you did a good job, but I just wanted to spend a minute on this. That for me, one of the things that's really critical in the job that we do is ensuring that we have a reliable system. Our energy system, electric and gas, is reliable. We know that our economy, our public health, public safety depends on that. Anyone who's traveled to a country or another region where that's not the case, you experience very firsthand what it means to not have a reliable system and what the ripple effects of that can be. So reliability is a really critical issue for me. When I look at this case and I look at the question of what's driving the rate increase and is it going to help us ensure a reliable system, I look at the capital expenditures as one of the biggest drivers. So in trying to communicate what those capital expenditures are, just going through the numbers, we have $5.5 billion being invested in the electric system, $1.4 billion in the gas system, which is $1.4 billion less than what National Grid asked for. So I guess, is there a way that we can just encapsulate for me what those investments are most going for and why they're needed now? It's a big number. It's what gets a lot of headlines, but just translate that for me into, why now? Why is it this level? And, how is it also going to ensure reliability?
I think there are maybe two, main categories for infrastructure investment. A lot of the existing infrastructure is very old. It's reached or is reaching the end of its useful life. And the other aspect is modernizing the grid to meet the increased load or expected increased load from electrification and electric vehicles primarily. And those are the two main factors, I think.
Okay. That's very helpful. I mean, as I look at it, other drivers, as Commissioner Majori mentioned, we have, there are taxes, property taxes included, that get passed on. There are other federal and state safety requirements that are part of this. So there's legal requirements that are built into ensuring a safe and reliable system. So I just wanted to highlight that as well. So one other thing that has gotten some attention that we didn't speak to is executive compensation. And it's my understanding that this JP does not include any ratepayer funding for executive bonuses for incentive compensation. I just want to get that on the record.
That's correct.
Okay. So the JP does not include ratepayer funding for executive incentive bonus compensation.
Correct.
Okay. All right. So those two things, in addition to what my colleagues have already stated, I just wanted to highlight some of the things that I also appreciate in this settlement. The outreach and marketing, enhanced outreach and marketing for the EAP program, which is the energy affordability program, as well as the enhanced energy affordability program, which we recently acted on as a commission. Special protection programs for the most vulnerable people in National Grid's territory. The implementation of cost-effective non-pipes alternatives for the gas system that will help avoid costly upgrades to the natural gas system. So those are some of the other things that I think are really worth highlighting in the settlement. As my colleagues have already stated, no one up here wants to approve a rate increase, but we have a legal obligation to ensure that we have a safe and reliable system and that our citizenry depends upon. So with that, I do see this as a balanced resolution that will continue to provide safe and reliable service, and that is in the public interest, so I will be supporting it.
Thank you. Commissioner Vlova?
Okay, well, as always, the benefit of going last is that I follow some great remarks, and I think my colleagues have covered a lot of what I would have wanted to say. And so to avoid being repetitive, I'll just generally say I'm very grateful to all of our staff for the hard work that they've put in, as well as all of the interveners, the parties to the case, and all the public commenters who submitted. I think Chair Christian noted something over 4,000 public comments have gone into this case. And I think that speaks to obviously how important rate cases are, because as my colleagues have already noted, it goes back to, in some cases, whether or not someone might have to make a decision between purchasing groceries or paying their electric bill. These are decisions that have real world impacts. And I am very impressed and encouraged both by the number of signatories as well as how diverse they are in terms of the various interests that they have, that they brought to the case, and that they were still able to reach this compromise. I don't think, I'll be frank, I don't think I will ever feel comfortable with raising rates, but I've acknowledged what, Chair Christian, I think, did such a great job at the outset describing the legal and regulatory framework within which the commission operates. It's really not an option for us to say utilities have to provide free service. And as uncomfortable as it makes me, I do think that the joint proposal as a whole is in the public interest. My colleagues have already described a lot of the positive provisions, so I won't go over them again. No joint proposal is without compromise. I don't think there is such a thing as a perfect joint proposal. And in fact, I don't think there is such a thing as a compromise. I think by definition, compromise means that you get some things and you don't get others. But again, overall, I think it's in the public interest, and I will be supporting. Thank you.
Thank you. It is now time for the vote. My vote is in favor of the recommendations contained in the draft order as discussed today. Commissioner Alisi, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Commissioner Valesky?
Yes.
Commissioner Majori?
Yes.
Commissioner Bright?
Yes.
Commissioner Sheehan?
Yes.
Commissioner Vlova?
Yes.
Thank you. The items approved and the recommendations are adopted. Thank you, staff.
Thank you.
With that, we now move to our second item for discussion today, item 202, case 24-E-0461 and 24-G-0462, as it relates to Central Hudson electric and gas rates. That'll be presented today by Judge Amiot and Judge Bergen, as well with Dakin Lee Cakes, Nicola Jones, Jeff Hogan, and Debbie Evans, who are available for questions. Judge, please begin.
Good morning, Chair Christian and Commissioners. As mentioned, my name is Leah Amiot. I was assigned to preside over these proceedings. Hold on, I think our mic's on. There you go. Thanks. Can everybody hear me? Okay, great. I was assigned to preside over these proceedings with Administrative Law Judge Erica Bergen, who is here with me this morning, along with Chief Administrative Law Judge Dakin Lee Cakes. Item 202 is a draft order that would approve a joint proposal, or JP, that establishes electric and gas delivery rate plans for Central Hudson Gas and Electric Corporation, which I will refer to as the company, for a 3-year period commencing July 1st, 2025. The JP is signed by the company, trial staff of the Department of Public Service, multiple interveners, or MI, and Walmart. The Public Utility Law Project, or PULP, the Utility Intervention Unit of the New York State Department of State, Dutchess County, and the Town of Olive Conservation Advisory Council have expressed that they take a neutral position while New York Assembly member Sarah Hannah Shrestha, Communities for Local Power, or CLP, and United States Congressperson Josh Riley opposed the JP. For the many, Key Capture Energy and the New York Power Authority also participated in these matters and have taken no position on the JP. By way of background, the company commenced these proceedings in August 2024, stating at that time that it was seeking 1-year unmoderated increases in electric delivery revenues of approximately $60